Welcome to our panel today, which is looking at the future of the egg industry. My name is Sophie Throop, and I look after agriculture, fisheries, and sustainable sourcing for Morrison's, where we know for certain that customers love eggs and are eating them and using them in greater quantities than ever before. But the question today, is it just about hens and farms, or really what else is the egg industry? So to help understand a little bit more, including the areas of challenge and opportunities that we're facing into, we've got a great team today on the panel, and I'll let them introduce themselves in a moment. But before I do, I'm going to turn to Hazel Russell from Morrison's own egg packing company, Chippendale Foods, who's going to give us a bit of a rundown. Hazel, would you mind letting us know a little bit more about you, but also all the work you've been doing to help bring the egg industry together and encourage new people to get involved?
Right, Sophie, thank you very much. Yes, my name's Hazel Russell. I've been working at Chippendale for a couple of years now, but my background goes back about 18 years in poultry. And yes, we've been working together with Bishop Burton College to try to bring together all different aspects of the industry to put together an academy that would actually encourage younger people into the industry. I'm sure that most people don't actually have any idea how much goes into getting an egg onto the supermarket shelf. As a whole, the industry is worth over £1 billion to the UK economy, and in the UK we consume 199 eggs per year per head. However, that's still less than other European countries, which gives us a huge growth potential, and we do have a big lack of younger people coming into the industry to fulfil that potential. Eggs were declared a superfood about 10 years ago, and since then they've become one of the fastest growing food proteins, and are seen now as a healthy and nutritious source of protein by dietitians and health professionals, as well as top performing athletes and sports people. So, and in addition to that, they're also cheap and accessible to those on fixed incomes, which again makes it a good industry to be going into. As a whole, the industry is technology driven with a high degree of automation throughout the industry. And I know you're going to hear a lot more of that from the panelists coming up. But it's also a very complex industry with many, many different sectors, as Sophie just said. So you've got breeding farms that help to look to improve the genetic potential of the birds. You've got hatcheries that hatch the chicks that grow into the commercial hens. You've got the rearing farms that take the day-old chick and grow them to a pullet, which is a bird ready to lay their eggs. You've got the laying farms, which I'm sure is probably the only bit that most people think about or are vaguely aware of, where the hens actually produce the eggs. And then you've got the packing centres like ourselves, where those eggs are gathered together, graded, packed, and set out to the wholesale market, food outlets and supermarkets. And then you've got the depots that distribute them. You've also got all the seconds eggs that don't even make it that far, that actually end up on going for processing into liquid egg and used in things like quiches, mayonnaise, catering products. And that's just the core part of the industry. There's a lot more besides. So you've got the animal feed and nutrition companies, the vets, the auditing bodies such as the RSPCA, British Egg Industry Council, and the Egg Inspectorate. You've got legislators, buildings and equipment, and associated technologies. The list is endless. And I think that's a very quick whistle-stop tour of what we're about. I'll hand you back over to Sophie so that all our wonderful guests can actually give us a bit more insight as to what they do and what they get up to and what their thoughts are on the future of the industry.
Thanks, Hazel. Crikey, I mean, there really are a lot of different jobs and talents and skills needed to get that egg on our plate of those 199 eggs that we're all eating every year. So yeah, just turning over to our panel then, just going to get everybody to introduce themselves. So Matthew, let's start with you, please.
Hello, so I'm Matthew Blaken. I'm a farmer and a free-range egg farmer. The business is Mowbray Farms, based in North Yorkshire. So we've got two fairly new free-range hen units. In fact, for 10 years, I was working for a large multinational chemical company in Central and Eastern Europe, and I saw that I wanted to be a part of what is, I think, quite a sustainable and growing business. So I came back to England and the cold of Yorkshire, and we're setting up, we've set up two farms now.
Thank you very much. Yes, very different, and be really interesting to hear from you a bit more. Isaac, over to you, please.
Hi there, I'm Isaac Green. I grew up in a farming background, but have been involved in a full-time capacity for 7 years in feed and pullet sales. In the first lockdown, me, a colleague and a friend set up a recruitment business trying to aim specifically at the poultry industry. We sort of feel there's huge opportunities in the industry, and you know, in summary, we're not really getting enough young people involved. So hopefully with the help of things like this and the Egg Academy, it'll really help push, you know, bring more young people into the industry.
Thank you. Amy, and then Mark, please.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. Hi, everyone. My name's Amy Marnie. I'm the Chief Poultry Advisor for the National Farmers Union. The National Farmers Union, or NFU as it's also known quite commonly, champions British agriculture and horticulture, and we campaign for a stable and sustainable future for British farmers. Personally, I came into the poultry industry in 2012 as a graduate trainee manager, working for an egg packer, and then joined the NFU 4 years ago.
Thank you, Amy and Sophie. So I'm Mark Williams. My job title is Chief Executive of the British Egg Industry Council. So the BEIC for short, that is the interprofessional trade association that represents the whole of the UK egg industry. So within membership, we have people like Amy's organisation, the NFU, plus all the different operations that work within the UK egg industry who represent the farmers, the breeders, the hatcheries, the pullet rearers. And my job primarily is to sort of take the strategic lead on behalf of the UK industry in terms of dealing with government, sorting issues out for the industry. And for those of you who buy eggs in a supermarket or other reputable outlets, you will see a little lion on the shell. We own that trademark and also run the scheme behind it, which is the world's leading food assurance scheme. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. So as I think as everybody agree, a really interesting panel for us to get some good insights from today. So the first question I'm going to be coming to you first, Matthew. So the first question we're going to think about is a bit of horizon scanning to get us started. So I'm really interested to understand and when you see the growth of the industry from your perspective over the next 10 years and, you know, what you see the opportunities are in it.
Yeah, so as a farmer, if we look to the next 10 years, let's look back to the last 10 years. In the last 10 years, I think farmers have got very good at animal welfare, at producing a really good quality product. All the difficulties with shed design, ventilation, lighting, it's just got a lot better. So the sheds themselves and how we keep the birds may not develop so quickly. What will develop quickly, I think, is how we manage the birds. That's making things more efficient, reducing the labor content or the amount of labor that we use on the farm. So that's a lot about adding computer systems and automated control systems. So we've got a shed here. It's like if I have visitors, I like to say it's like a 747 jet full of chickens, because it's all computer controlled or climate controlled. It's all computer controlled from water, from feeding. So that's all controlled. What I think will develop into the future is potentially more AI. So systems which can predict, you know, it's going to be a hot day tomorrow. What does the shed need to do? How can we maybe adjust the feeding or the lighting or the water, just to make the hens more comfortable. There is also the element of just trying to make it as efficient as possible. That's robots. So we've got a new shed here. It's got essentially, the shed itself is like one big robot, because it's controlling, it's automated, it's controlling how the eggs are transported onto the packer. And then we've got it's an old it's a robot from a car factory that's being repurposed to stack the eggs onto pallets. But I think if you look at, I think there's going to be more development in terms of that robotic element. Robots, essentially, when you look at them, they serve a number of functions, taking away things that are dirty, dangerous, and dull. Well, nothing's really dangerous here, but there are some dirty jobs and some dull jobs. So what's going to happen is robots are going to come in more, and then we're going to need more sophisticated people, more technically aware people to be able to control the system. And then you're going to start getting into more precision management. You know, we control a building as one, but I don't know what each individual area of birds are doing. And I think in the future, we could probably get better at managing. Maybe there's one end of the shed and they're not doing so well, and they need slight climate adjustment. So the question would be, are the systems going to develop in the next 10 years so we can have sort of microclimate developments, maybe changing the food in one area of the shed to give those birds a little bit of a boost. So the areas that I think there's going to be a lot of changes in the next 10 years. It's going to be very exciting. So we're going to need a lot of skills in data, in AI, and just the ability to run the computer systems and manage the computer systems as well.
Gosh, that really is sort of painting a fascinating industry. I mean, so much further away than perhaps many of us may have once thought about eggs, you know, just sort of picking eggs from a field, you know, with a basket or whatever. It's a very sophisticated industry. I mean, Amy, turning to you as a representative of all poultry farmers in the UK, I mean, I guess you get to find out a lot of thoughts about the future from your members and also from other industry. I mean, coming from your perspective, where do you see eggs in this industry in 10 years' time?
Thanks, Sophie. Yeah, I think it's really interesting what Matthew said then, and looking back at the past and actually how far we've come already. But I think one of the most exciting things about poultry as a whole is that we've got a lot of opportunity to grow as well. I think the consumption piece is a really interesting one to look at, and actually it's, you know, a really affordable, versatile protein that people need in their diet. So I'd like to see that consumption piece grow even further, and we'll see innovation then in the sector already, and helping people sort of access that product on the shelf.
No, that's really great. I mean, I think Mark, thinking about you obviously from the Line Care perspective and also from the whole industry council, free range really has been a bit of a success story, hasn't it? Is it still going to continue?
We believe so, Sophie, absolutely. And the reasons for this is because many consumers now are very animal welfare conscious, and they believe that free range is the future. Now, we are very proud here in the United Kingdom to have a very dynamic industry. We produce eggs from different systems of egg production. And that gives or allows, shall we say, shoppers to be able to make that choice when they go into a supermarket to buy their eggs. But sort of just picking up on the consumption things Amy referred to, you know, we are in an industry that is growing. And as everybody will understand, it's better than working in a declining industry. So the opportunities that open up with that are absolutely phenomenal. And Hazel touched on it in her introduction. You know, European egg consumption tends to average around 215 to 220 eggs per person per year. If you go to Mexico, it's 370. You know, so in the UK, from our 199, we've still got some way to go, but we're making inroads to move that now. But, you know, we have nature's perfect parcel, which is packed within that eggshell, full of vitamins, minerals, and it is nature's perfect protein. And did you know, interesting fact here, that the egg protein is so pure, it is the reference protein against which others are measured. So that gives you an idea of how good our product is.
Wow, that is really interesting. I did not know that. That's fascinating. And Isaac, I mean, lastly, from your perspective, I mean, what should we be going for and thinking about over these next 10 years?
Well, I think, as Mark alluded to a bit in that, I think it's really exciting that we've got the biggest free range flock in the world. And the narrative around having that free range flock, especially when you look into the successful brands that we see on the shelves today, just shows how receptive the consumer is to that sort of story. And I think that's the real benefit we've got within a sector, and I think we can be proud of that. You know, as a sector in the whole of agriculture, that we are leading in that sort of media and services department in terms of marketing. I think it's really exciting, and I think, as Mark was alluding to with the consumption, we're doing well, and the growth's great, but there's a really long way to go. And I think, you know, further investment in the industry is going to be vital to continue that curve of solid growth.
Yeah, thank you. So I think it's, as you say, thinking about free range, and obviously then that also leads us into thinking about the environment as well, and, you know, the environment that we all farm on and in. This whole sort of piece about sustainability is very much part of our consciousness now. I know certainly at Morrison's we're hearing our customers asking more and more questions about sustainability. What does that actually mean? How can we shop more sustainably? You know, what are you doing with products to make them more sustainable? I mean, obviously I know the NFU have led the way for farming and the farming industry in setting that goal to be net zero by 2040. I mean, here at Morrison's, we've also set our own goal for our UK agricultural supply chain as well to be net zero by 2030, which we know is hugely challenging. But all of these things are going to need a different way of thinking and working and consuming to be effective. And of that, we know that science is going to help with some of these answers. But I'm interested to know from all of your perspectives whether you think industry plans for sustainability are achievable, and actually, you know, what does it all mean to you? I mean, Isaac, if we turn to you first this time, you know, what are your sort of thoughts about sustainability and the sustainable egg and the role of science and skills?
Yeah, I think there's some really exciting innovations within the poultry sector. I think one of those you could look at would be white egg and the potential of white egg on the shelf in the supermarket. We know white egg layers effectively lay more eggs, eat less food, do everything more efficiently. But ultimately, we've got to convert the consumer to want to buy white egg ultimately. But in terms of the effect that has on the environment, that's a really interesting sort of thought for the future. Is can we look at either, especially with the how we're going to get rid of cage birds or colony birds, could that be a value egg opportunity for the future?
And just to clarify, when you're sort of saying white egg, you mean basically the white shells around the eggs, and so customers not sort of wanting a white shelled egg as much as a brown shelled egg. Is that kind of where you're going there? Yeah,
exactly. I think it's as simple as that. Is you go on the continent and white eggs are more popular than brown eggs in different parts of the world. They're the status quo, but in the UK we've been sort of we've all grown up to see brown egg on the shelves, but there's alternatives out there, and it's a really interesting when you delve deeper into performance and food consumption and all the KPIs are really interesting in terms of what we can do with white eggs and how they've succeeded in other parts of the world.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I think, Matthew, looking from a farmer's perspective, that sort of whole piece about, you know, performance indicators and how you can measure feed, and, you know, I suppose that's part of the sustainability question from your perspective.
Yeah, so in terms of what we consume as a farmer producing eggs, well, you're consuming power, not heat. We don't have to heat the sheds. Hens are their own little mini heaters, but you do have to ventilate them and cool them in the summer. So you're consuming electricity, and you're also consuming feed. In terms of the first thing is to get everything as efficient as possible. So by looking after the birds, making sure they've got good feather cover, they don't eat as much, they convert more of that feed into egg. So being efficient is one way that we can reduce the CO2 emissions, for example. The other way is, well, we're using a lot of electricity in the summer. That's exactly the same time that solar is producing most electricity. So actually solar and egg production go very well together. We're looking at putting a big solar plant here because a lot of the a lot of the electricity we use is just for cooling, and that it works perfectly. You're using it in the daytime. That's when the solar is producing the electricity. The other area would be feed. And soya is currently the key component of a protein of at least 20% of the feed is soya protein. I'm really interested in the future in looking at insect protein, for example. It will take a long time to get there, but if you imagine a hen naturally in the wild, it's eating lots of insects, it's eating everything, and insects are a big part of the diet. And there are studies to show that the insect's sort of protein and amino acid composition is really quite beneficial to hens, even in small amounts. So I'm following that with a keen interest. I think it'll take a long time, but if that starts up, that's going to be really exciting to be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess as well, so many less food miles if the insects are there on the farm versus coming from other countries. I mean, Mark, from a whole sector perspective, I'm sure, representing from a council perspective, as you do, sustainability is going to be high on your agenda.
Absolutely, Sophie. So consumers expect food to be safe, which is put on the shelves. That should be a given. More recently, and by that I mean over the last sort of 20, 25 years, animal welfare or hen welfare has become much more important. And that's why we've seen such a phenomenal growth in free range here in the United Kingdom, for example. But going forward, and it's particularly pertinent for the younger generation, and that is that the environment is increasingly taking on greater importance. And as has been alluded to by others, the egg industry has got a great story to tell here. And bizarrely, even though we talk about free range as being, which consumers want to, in terms of a carbon footprint, it is actually a colony cage that is the most efficient. But that doesn't always sit well with some consumers. So we've always got the potential conflicts going on, which we as producers and the industry have to manage. And it comes back to what Hazel said right at the beginning. If most people knew the actual steps that are gone through, whether it be the science, the genetics, the actual production, etc., that goes with putting a dozen eggs on a shelf for a consumer to buy, they would be absolutely staggered. But we love it. We're all part of it, and we encourage others to join us.
Yeah, thank you. I think that you raise a really interesting point there, actually, that whole sort of holistic view about how we're running, farms and indeed all of our industry, balancing that sort of like sustainability for the environment, but also sustainability for welfare and hen health, and indeed people who work on farms as well is I guess part of the important puzzle we've got to sort of all try and fix. But Amy, coming back over to you, as I sort of said at the top of this particular section, the NFU set this target to be net zero for 2040. I'm guessing that you're doing an awful lot as an organisation to help your members get there.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. Yeah, so our president, Minette Batters, set the ambition to be net zero by, and I think it's important to note that's holistic approach. It's everybody doing a little bit. Some farms will be able to do a lot, and others not so much. But actually, it's about going on a journey together. And so we're not there yet, and we know that. We know there's lots that we need to do. But I think the poultry sector's in a really good place already, and we know that 2/3 of poultry producers have renewables. And so that's poultry as a whole, poultry, meat and egg production. But that's quite a staggering figure, really. We also know, particularly in the free range sector, lots of producers plant beyond what they need to for, say, their assurance scheme. So that's really good as well. As others have mentioned, carbon footprinting tools are being refined, and more producers are able to sort of look more at the detail on their own units and see which changes they can make for the future. I think one of the exciting areas as well for poultry is this piece on all. And I think it comes down to that question of sort of what don't we know yet, which kind of answers itself because we don't know it. But 10 years we wouldn't have been talking about insect protein being used on a commercial scale, which perhaps is only a few years away. So we need new minds to help us look at different alternatives and solutions. So an exciting time for the poultry sector.
Yeah, thank you. And that is it is fascinating. It is really from the more traditional planting trees, as you sort of described, to, you know, sort of innovative technologies. It's all a combination of all of those, really, isn't it, that we're needing to think about that whole sustainability piece. So I think we've all been touching on this as we've been going through the discussion, but here we are, New Scientists Live. We're really interested in engaging with with people perhaps haven't thought about the egg industry in agriculture and the food chain before. I'm just fascinated to understand how you have all sort of got into your careers. I know you've been touched on it a little bit, but Amy, I'll come to you first, because, you know, sometimes it has been heard that careers advisors will say, well, agriculture is just about farming. I mean, how would you react to this statement?
Well, unfortunately, I'd have to agree with that statement, because my own personal shows that, you know, many years ago when I was at school, and I met with the careers advisor, I said I wanted to look at a career in agriculture, and they sort of said, oh, why would you want to do that? And sort of pointed me towards some other careers. But it was my determination that, no, actually, I'm not keen on those other careers, and I do want to go into agriculture. That sort of saw me through there. So I think it's important that if you are keen, make sure you don't just get put off. But it does worry me that, you know, with young people looking towards that aren't given the opportunity to explore all the amazing opportunities. You know, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being a poultry farmer, but it's not just about being a poultry farmer. It's about all the ancillaries that we need to enable poultry farmers to be their best, whether that be a geneticist or a nutritionist or a marketeer. We really need everyone, and we need, you know, science and evidence to underpin everything that we do. So, yeah, that's probably where I would come from.
Well, thanks for that, and that's good to have that personal insight. I mean, Mark, what route did you have into the sector?
Well, I was fortunate enough to be born onto a poultry farm. So I grew up collecting eggs, managing pullets, looking after poultry meat hens or broilers, if you like. But, you know, I chose a route whereby I decided not to stay on the farm. I wanted to sort of broaden my horizons. So I went to agricultural college a few years ago. I then came out, and I guess it's like everything in life, you need to hone your people skills. So I went off to work in the industry for a few years, managing what was then the most modern laying farm in Europe at that time. And then went back to the home farm to expand it. You know, we sort of quadrupled the size of it, doing actually broilers then, or meat birds. But after that, I then spent a few years working for the National Farmers Union in different parts of the country, finally doing eggs as a speciality. And then I came across to look after the British Egg Industry Council a few years back, and I've been there since. But, you know, I think the key thing is it doesn't matter whether you were born onto a farm or not. I mean, you know, you look at what Amy's just said. You know, poultry isn't farming as probably most people would think or believe, or are even told by others outside the industry, for that matter. You know, because it's always been unsupported, and by that I mean it hasn't had subsidy like some agriculture sectors have in the past. It's meant it has to be technologically efficient, very innovative, as Matthew was describing earlier in terms of what he's doing on his farm. But also it has to respond to consumer demands, and that is why we have eggs from different production systems on sale in this country. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's up to shoppers whether they buy a product or don't buy it. So we know we're doing something right by the fact that our industry is growing, consumption's going up, There's more hens in this country now, and as a result of Brexit, there will be greater opportunities, certainly at farm level, as we seek to grow our self-sufficiency still higher. So it's a hugely dynamic industry, and it's not just the farming side that's important. There's all the other jobs that go with making the industry to be what it is today.
Thanks, Mark. That really is showing us what a diverse industry this is. And Isaac, you were sort of saying right at the beginning of our get together that I think you've just set up a recruitment company here. So you're clearly seeing the need for skills in the sector.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really exciting time for us, especially for young entrants into the workplace. There's huge demand in this sector of agriculture. I sort of stumbled into, well, I say stumbled, I grew up with a farming background, but it was only really when I got into feed sales that I see sort of the broad scope of the sector and the opportunities within it. And I think that's when you realise, you know, from genetics to nutrition, equipment, media and services, that the actual scale of the job and how many opportunities there are. I think that's the really exciting part, especially for young people. You hear it an awful lot, is there's not enough young people come into the industry, and you know, I'm sure everyone would back me up on that, and that's a really huge opportunity for the sector as a whole to get involved in that.
And I guess it doesn't just have to be young people. It could be sort of people at different stages of their lives if they wanted to come into the industry too.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's like Mark was saying, it's an unsupported industry financially, and I think it's that just shows how many innovations there are within it and how much success it's had. We've got you know, the UK free range flock's massive. It's what the world's biggest free range flock. So I think the minds within that, it's a really strong narrative. I think we're good at selling our end products. I think we've actually just got to work on selling our workplace almost. I think that's part of it. We've got such a great narrative around free range egg and everything involved with that. But it's actually only once you get into it and see what opportunities there are, maybe we actually have to get out and sell the workplace more. And that's part of the reason why we've set up the recruitment business, is just to present the opportunities to colleges and beyond. Like I say, it's not just young people that are in demand, it's everyone really. There's so many job opportunities within the industry as a whole.
Yeah, thanks, Isaac. I mean, just lastly, coming back over to you, Matthew, to sort of close us for this piece. It's you said at the beginning that you actually had another career outside the egg industry, but then sort of like came away from that and into this. So yeah, from your perspective, I guess this must have some attractive benefits to be part of.
Well, the expectation of people who say, I work on a chicken farm, and reality is completely different. You can imagine I worked my way up through a large German chemical company. I ended up in the headquarters in Germany, responsible for a large part of Europe. And then I explained to them, I'm going to be a chicken farmer. I think they thought I was going to walk around with my 10 chickens in a bucket all day. But actually, it's I love it, and it's completely different from expectations. In terms of careers, yeah, I mean, there's careers within the industry, but there's also lots of career and good careers on farm. If you ask most farmers what the limiting factor is, it's probably labour would come in the top two, because these units are getting bigger, they're getting more sophisticated, lots of computers, lots of robots, and we need really good people to manage it. And there aren't that many people, because people aren't aware of it, coming into the industry. So they can really command decent salaries and really good future prospects. You don't have to work on a farm. I've got people working here who accidentally, because of COVID, came to work here. They don't have any farm experience. They're doing great. And you can, if you're good and if you've got an aptitude for it, you can end up being quite young, managing multi-million-pound turnovers with staff. You can have a house, you can have a vehicle, and you can live in the countryside. It's really quite a nice, attractive proposition compared to what's out there. And yeah, there's lots of demand.
That's absolutely fascinating and a really interesting place to close. So thank you, everybody for what's been a really interesting and engaging conversation. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope everybody listening has found it as informative as I have. So the next piece is that we're going to move over now to our live Q&A session, and so please, if anybody has any questions at all, please do submit them, and we'll do our best to answer them in the live session, which is coming up next. Thank you very much indeed.